Welcome to the Blockchain VC, a podcast about crypto and the digital assets ecosystem. My name is Tomer Federman, and I'm the managing partner at Federman Capital. We invest in the most promising blockchain startups across the globe. I have more than 15 years of experience in tech, and before starting the fund, I was on the product side at Facebook, where I led product strategy and global growth of some of Facebook's major ad products. Previously, I also lived in Silicon Valley for a few years, where I attended Stanford Business School. You can find me on Twitter at Tomer Federman. Before we begin, please note that this podcast is for informational purposes only, and all the opinions expressed on this show, either by guests or me, do not reflect the opinions of Federman Capital. Nothing on the Blockchain VC podcast represents an investment or financial advice. Please do your own research. Also, if you like this episode of the Blockchain VC and want to help bring more awareness to the space, I'd really appreciate it if you can rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. This only takes a few seconds and helps get the word out. Okay, let's do this. Really excited to welcome to the show today Alex Adelman, co-founder and CEO of Lolli. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So before we dive into Lolli, would love to learn more, Alex, about your background and how you got into the crypto space.
Yeah, for sure. So, started. I've been building companies for a while now, building technology since I was around 12. Started with building video games back in the day, and then realized I could build more like front end projects and then back end projects, and then had just been building software for a long time now. I was always fascinated with commerce and payments being a medium of exchange, and always sort of found frustration when I was sending payments overseas or working with anyone in different countries around the current payment infrastructure that was in place, and sort of us being beholden to the banks and being beholden to country regulations and all that good stuff, when I just wanted to move money to people that I was communicating with online. I ended up studying economics at UNC Chapel Hill, and getting really interested in microfinance and sort of the advancements there with things like the Grameen Bank going on in Bangladesh and really all over the world. And so after college, I wanted to solve this problem of connecting commerce. How do you give everyone in the world the ability to buy and sell anywhere? So I started this company called Cosmic, and we built this e-commerce gateway that let people buy and sell anywhere. And we ended up growing the company over the next 4.5 years, and ended up getting acquired by our biggest customer, which was Pop Sugar, to come in and power $1.2 billion in retail revenue. We grew significantly post-acquisition, and then we were acquired again by an even bigger company called Ebates, Rakuten. And that's the biggest cashback company in the US and I think in many parts of the world. So we ended up working there, getting to know the cashback rewards.
When was that, Alex?
That was in 2000. We were acquired the first time in 2015 and acquired the second time in 2017 by Rakuten.
Got it. Okay, cool.
And so after about a year, we parted ways, and the team and I went, we took some time off, and we started looking at what was the next problem that we wanted to solve. And being deep in the payment space over the last, the prior 7 years, we were really, I think, frustrated with, I think, a lot of I would say the archaic rails is probably the best way to describe it, that were in place to move money around from a consumer's perspective, from an enterprise perspective. Just moving money is very difficult, very expensive. And there's just taxes in place at every point you turn, because you always have to pay, a series of middlemen that are taking in my opinion, unnecessary fees at every point. So 5 years prior to this time, we had all learned about Bitcoin, and just we created a Slack channel, and we were we were all very interested in this idea that it was the first asset in the entire world that everybody could own. And anyone that with an internet connection could go on, buy it, move it, trade it, anything, for very low transaction costs. And that to me was just like incredible. I hadn't seen anything like it since I was like 12 and was first playing around with like games and the internet. And so I was really inspired by it. My whole team was very inspired by it. And we actually tried to implement it into our last company, and talk to a lot of merchants around it. But we're very, I was surprised with how few merchants were interested. So I had a lot of learnings around merchant adoption about 5, 6 years ago, and merchants just really weren't interested in many of the aspects about Bitcoin. It was highly volatile. It wasn't a there weren't enough people that had it, and so it just never made sense for a lot of merchants to accept it. And on the consumer side, people didn't really want to spend it, and they still don't really want to spend it. So I think I sort of took those learnings. We never really applied it to the Cosmic business model. And fast forward to working at Ebates, the biggest cashback company in the U.S., and seeing the rewards model from the inside of the belly of the beast, as they say. We got to see of like, okay, there's people that want rewards. Rewards are a great way of distributing cash to people. How do we distribute Bitcoin to people, solving arguably Bitcoin's biggest problem, which is distribution, and make Bitcoin more accessible to everybody, have a real use case for how people are actually using Bitcoin on a daily basis, and solve that problem based on our expertise.
So the same core team that worked together on your previous startup, the same core team is the one you're working with right now on Lolli.
Yes, exactly.
Got it. And it seems like you saw the potential and the opportunities with Bitcoin fairly early on. If you say like 5 years before that, you've already started thinking about that.
Yeah, I think I clearly wish I had invested more than I did, but I also didn't have any money back then. I was like bootstrapping a startup, and
Right.
yeah, but I believed in the technology and the principles of Bitcoin early on, and I mean, to this day, I'm a huge believer in Bitcoin and its potential, and already what good it's done for the world and what it will do for the world, and also realizing how early it is in the space. It's like day one of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, digital currency, and it takes time to do anything as massive as Bitcoin is doing right now, and other cryptocurrencies are probably going to do in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I think sometimes for those of us who are so deep in the weeds, I just had a conversation yesterday with another investor, and he asked me if I think it's too late to get into Bitcoin, right? Because he's like,
Yeah.
oh, I mean, it's like at this point, it's. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, we barely started scratching the surface.
Exactly, and I think like you and I probably agree. It's inevitable. Like there's no way that in 10 to 15 years we're using the archaic rails that we were using. The same archaic rails that we were using 30 years ago. Like it's actually insane to me that it hasn't that we haven't evolved. With the age of the internet. Over the last 20 years, that payments are still working on the same archaic rails as they were 30 years ago. So the world needs new rails. It's getting too expensive to run these companies, and there's too much pressure on a lot of these like fintech companies, social media companies. Moving money and is just too difficult, and there's too much tension. And so there is a call. There's enough of a demand at this point to drive moving money and cost and middlemen down to zero. And cryptocurrencies do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one aspect of it is just the cost, right? But the
Mm-hmm.
other aspect is just the speed, especially when you're thinking about like cross-border payments. It's just so painful right now when you use like the, legacy financial system to move money from one country to the other, right? It could take days, not to mention
Yeah,
like the cost
days.
that you just mentioned. Yeah, and the thing that I laugh about it, but it's quite painful when you go through it, right? The most annoying thing is actually when you move large amounts of money cross border, and then you call the bank and you ask like 2 3 days later, you still haven't received the money in the other account, and they don't know where the money is, right? It's like,
Yeah.
what's going on? Like, I sent it like 3 days ago, still hasn't arrived, and they're not sure because you have all these intermediary banks and all these third parties involved.
Exactly. It's just, and it's also like we have never lived in such a global world where there. I would love to see like a graph of like how many more like commerce connections there are across the entire world than there were 20 years ago. Like companies have all, there are plenty of multinational companies that have done business together for many years, but as an individual, we're consuming content all over the world. We're buying things all over the world. We're global citizens, and we don't have a currency or reserve store of value that supports that globalization that the internet has brought us.
Yeah, I mean, we have one, but it's the same one that we had like
Yeah,
50 years ago, right? It
right.
hasn't changed whatsoever. I mean, yes, we now have a mobile app for our bank, but once you make a transaction, it works exactly the same on the back end. Takes the exact same amount of time. The fees are pretty much the same. The whole process basically works the same. It's nuts. So, what is Lolli, Alex? Would love to hear more about what you're working on.
Yeah, so Lolli is a Bitcoin rewards app, Bitcoin rewards company more so, and we give people free Bitcoin when they shop online. We partner with over 750 top merchants, and when our users shop their sites, they get Bitcoin back for all their purchases, for their travel, and yeah, we make it really simple for people to earn Bitcoin so that they don't have to invest in it as a way to get involved in the space.
Right. So to make sure that our listeners understand, so you install an extension, right? Where
Mhm.
basically like a browser extension. Then once you shop online, basically you get rewards in the form of Bitcoin.
Correct. Yeah, it's a browser extension to start. It's live for both Chrome and Firefox, and then it's also a website that you can shop on as well. And we have a list of all of our partners. You go on, you can sort by grocery, you can sort by essentials, travel, whatever you're looking for, and you can go to that merchant site. You shop as you normally would. You don't have to change your behavior, and then you get Bitcoin back when you shop.
So how does that work exactly? Like who sends you that amount of Bitcoin?
So yeah, it functions very similarly to the company that bought my last company, which is it's a cashback model. We partner with these merchants, and these merchants they are looking for new customers, and they're looking to attract customers through a loyalty model, and so we have our users, and these merchants will incentivize our users to shop their sites. So different merchants will give different percentages back depending on how they're incentivizing our users, and then our users go to these sites and shop or book travel.
I guess the point I'm curious about in the standard cashback model, I mean, all merchants have cash, or at least
Hmm.
hopefully they do. Does that, if they work with you, does that mean that they now need to buy and custody Bitcoin in order to be able to pay these cashbacks in the form of Bitcoin?
No, and it's actually something that I think I personally am very proud of, is that it's a lot of people look at us as like a means for consumer adoption of Bitcoin. But I think arguably one of the more important parts of Lolly is that we're actually advancing merchant adoption as well. And part of the reason we're advancing merchant adoption is that we're not coming in and we're not asking them to go integrate a big payments tool. We're not having to sell into 4 or 5 different parts of the organization. We get to come into their marketing department, and we get to say, look, we're driving new sales. It's a very easy integration, and we're able to send you new customers when you shop, and we're also able to de-risk it, and we don't change any of the business processes. We drive sales, the same as an Ebates or Rakuten drive sales, and we're just incentivizing our users with Bitcoin instead of cash.
Got it. So who actually custodies the Bitcoin? Like, how does that work? So let's say, I don't know if you want to give a name of one merchant that works with you.
Booking.com is a great example.
Yeah, but let's say booking.com. So booking.com doesn't necessarily or doesn't actually hold the Bitcoin, right? Based on what you
No, they don't
just
have
said.
to touch Bitcoin.
They don't have
And
to touch Bitcoin. Got it.
yeah,
So okay. So how does that
so
work then?
we without disclosing too much information about our backend and security processes, we have a series of I'm trying to think of what I can share, what I want to share. Um, so we have a series of custody solutions and OTCs that we use to both buy the Bitcoin at a better price than the exchanges or majority of the exchanges, and then we're able to hold that in a secure custody for our users until they want to transfer it out to their own Bitcoin addresses or US dollar bank accounts.
And why would, from the merchant perspective, why would they want to do that? I mean, obviously they want to incentivize shopping. There's many ways to do that, right? The more traditional ones, with cash or miles and so forth. What has been kind of your selling point to these merchants in order to, I guess, both educate them about the opportunity with Bitcoin and incentivize them to start working with you guys?
So it's a few things, and it really, the pitch sort of is tailored to the specific merchant, but it really depends on who the merchant is, what I know that their involvement or interest is in cryptocurrency in general. But we really give we give merchants the what I think is the easiest way to get involved in the space without actually having to do an integration. So for some merchants that want to get involved in Bitcoin or crypto, they look at Lolli as like an easy, low hanging fruit to do that. Some merchants, they don't really care about cryptocurrency, and that's fine. They just care that we are bringing them new users and users that are that want to shop. And so if you look at like a lot of different rewards models, a lot of companies do incentives with points. Some do incentives with cashback. Some do it with gift cards. There's a lot of different incentive models out there, and a lot of the merchants are agnostic with the different incentive models. They don't quite care what people are incentivizing with. They're just interested in driving sales and loyalty to those users. So we've been able to show. I mean, the cryptocurrency community, the Bitcoin community specifically, is a very loyal community. They want their Bitcoin, and they're loyal to that, and they will shop at the merchants that give them their Bitcoin. So our community has been incredibly successful in actually getting us new merchants because I don't know if you follow us on Twitter, but we have an incredibly active community, and when we're getting a new merchant, hotels.com, for instance, or booking.com, we've gotten a lot of them because we're like, hey guys, who do you want to use for travel? Like, where do you want to shop? What do you want to do? And people will tweet at them and be like, hey, join Lolli. And so enough of our users are active enough that our community is really driving adoption of our merchants, and then our merchants are driving adoption of new users because we can then market those brands to our new users.
That's really exciting because I think beyond just obviously going Lolly, I think you're doing a service for the whole asset class and for the whole industry by helping to bring on these merchants and educating them about the space.
Thank you. We're doing our best, but yeah, it seems to be there's because of the two-sided market, it seems to be advancing both these sides, which is ultimately advancing Bitcoin and cryptocurrency as a whole.
Right. And right now it's just Bitcoin, right?
Yeah. So Lolli is Bitcoin only. I'm personally, I think the longest on Bitcoin. I think that Bitcoin is a secure store of value. I believe that it has long-term value. It already has served value to society as a whole. I think that there's a lot of other cryptocurrencies out there that still have to prove their value before I would feel confident enough, or our community would give us have enough demand to request these other currencies. We have not had that much demand for any other currency other than Bitcoin, and really it's like a lot of people are trying to decide between, do they want cash back or do they want Bitcoin back, and that's their biggest decision that they have to make. I don't want a user to have to decide, do I earn Bitcoin or do I earn one of 1,000 different currencies? So I'm personally longest on Bitcoin, and I also think that ultimately our community will decide what future currencies, if any, that we ever do. But We very much are run by our community and and what's being requested from our users.
Got it. I guess the obvious question is there's this conception that many people who buy and hold Bitcoin don't want to spend it, right? Because just like you said, right, they view it as a store of value and they'd like to hold on to it in the long run because they think it's going to appreciate in value over time. Do you agree with that concept? And then if that is true, wouldn't it make sense to integrate some stable coins which are pegged to the US dollar, and then you don't have that issue anymore?
Absolutely. So that's part of our long-term plan. I don't foresee people wanting to spend Bitcoin for a long time. It's a store of value, and it's historically gone significantly up in value. So unless you believe that it's going down in value, there's really very few reasons to actually spend it. And altruistically, like maybe people spend it because they want to increase network activity, but that's not really an efficient or scalable way of like continuing to have Bitcoin be a pervasive currency. So I think that like Lightning Network is making it even more efficient for moving sums of money around, and I think that I'm very excited for like the long term possibility of like what Lightning will do to for both moving money, buying Bitcoin, all this sort of stuff, and for people who want to move money cross border and who like not in particular for the U.S. but maybe other countries who where Bitcoin is more stable than their native currency. So I think Bitcoin. Last I checked, and I can stand corrected, but I'm sure it moves around a lot. But last I checked, Bitcoin was like the 45th most stable currency in the world. So as it becomes more stable, every currency after that would opt to use Bitcoin as their primary currency. And so play out the scenario when Bitcoin becomes a top 10 most stable currencies, then 11 through 200 will go use hypothetically Bitcoin as a more stable store of value and medium of exchange. We are a long way from Bitcoin being more or less volatile than the US dollar, and a long way from Bitcoin reaching its maximum potential, because if that's the future for Bitcoin, Bitcoin is going to be valued way higher because it's being used as a more of a reserve currency, or reserve store of value and a medium of exchange for other countries. So we're a long way away from that being the future. So in the present, I think that the most interesting technologies are stablecoins pegged to top fiat currencies like the US dollar. And those are going to be the most interesting, that actually give people the ability to transfer money in and out of Bitcoin as their store into a medium of exchange for spending. People are going to want to use currencies like the U.S. dollar or stable coins that are pegged to the U.S. dollar in particular, because that's the most stable store of value. And really, the U.S. dollar, for the most part, is a great store of value for anyone outside of the U.S. Because it's more stable and the inflation, is quote unquote only 2%. So it's actually not a bad store of value for most people in the world that would like to be pegged to the US dollar.
Right, makes sense. So you're saying basically because people view Bitcoin as store of value, getting that as a cashback option is actually viewed very favorably. But for commerce, it probably wouldn't act as a medium of exchange anytime soon because of that volatility, and stablecoins actually offer that opportunity or that functionality in the short term.
Exactly. So I think that some of the most exciting projects just that we're looking at for the next like 5 to 10 years are, and I'm looking out for, one, Bitcoin, Bitcoin-backed stablecoins, US dollar-backed stablecoins, and the technologies that make it easy to essentially air swap between the two, so that you can more seamlessly transfer from US dollar to Bitcoin completely seamlessly and securely and decentralized. So a lot of factors. Like clearly, there's a lot of stable coins out there. I think that the ones that will have the most value over time are the ones that are the most decentralized and look most similar to Bitcoin.
Do you have plans to go beyond online shopping and also extend your offering to physical stores?
Absolutely. So we're building our mobile app right now that we will launch in the next few months, and that's going to give people the ability to earn in more places. Is the best way to probably describe the future experience. So I want people to be able to go pick up their morning coffee and earn Bitcoin. Take a ride share with like Lyft or Uber and earn Bitcoin. Trying to make Bitcoin a part of people's everyday lives. If they're not spending Bitcoin, they have to make it a part of their everyday lives. And the thing that I think a lot of people are attracted to, if you look at like coupon clippers or people who are or people who love rewards, they're always looking for the most rewards. And our users that joined us when Bitcoin was at 3,600 have now almost tripled their earnings. So our average percent back is 7%. These people effectively earned 21% on average back on their purchases on like everyday items. So as Bitcoin continues to increase in value over time, it gives people the ability to effectively earn more on their purchases, on their everyday purchases. So yeah, it sort of has this like beautiful flywheel effect of, we bring on more merchants, those we bring on more users, those users earn more Bitcoin goes up, and then we bring on more merchants and more users, and so on and so forth. So it's so far we're a year and a half in, and that flywheel effect has already happened many times over, and it's continuing to happen more, and I think it'll happen even more when we launch our mobile app.
That's awesome. And 7% you said is the average? That seems really high.
It is because we partner with them on a marketing level. We're not partnering with the merchants on a credit card interchange fee level that's much lower. We're doing it on we're driving significant amounts of what we call incremental revenue, incremental value to these merchants.
Got it. And then when you extend to physical stores, how do you imagine that working exactly? Okay, so you're gonna launch a mobile app, and then what? Like I check out in the physical store, and I just launch the mobile app, and I check out using that, and then I get my Bitcoin rewards.
Yeah, effectively yes.
So who are the typical users? Like who uses Lolli right now?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's actually I've been really interested too to see who these users are and what they're like, and we collect absolute minimal data, so we actually don't know a ton about our users outside of surveys that we do and um, qualitatively what we're seeing on Twitter and Instagram and other channels of who's talking about us and sharing us. And we, clearly we don't sell data or collect any meaningful data about our users or shopping history or anything. It's just not our business model, and we're not incentivized to do so. So what we do know is that our users are about 20 to 30 years old, and that it's a 70% male, 30% female, and that's interesting for a couple of reasons. One, I think that the last stat that I saw is that 4% of all crypto users are female. So we're increasing the amount of female users into crypto space, which I think is incredibly important to make. It's part of our mission. It's how do we make Bitcoin more accessible to all, and a lot of that means making it more accessible to both genders, to people all over the world, people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, the unbanked, the banked. How do we make Bitcoin more accessible to everybody? And seeing, just in early days that we're bringing women into crypto, I think is a great first step into that. The other thing that we're seeing is that we're bringing a very young demographic into the reward space that is, way younger than the traditional demographic that was at Ebates when I was there. It was a much older demographic. So I think that's really exciting as well. Because effectively the merchants care about a younger consumer. They want the next generation of high earners, high spenders, and that's what they're optimizing for. So they're more excited about our users than they are about other rebate or cashback companies because we're bringing in this millennial audience. We're also able to attract merchants that aren't on these other cashback or coupon sites. Companies like Glossier or companies like Everlane, for instance, that aren't on a lot of these coupon or cashback sites because they don't want to like cheapen their brand, but they do want to elevate their brand with a company like ours that is educating people on the power of cryptocurrency, empowering this next generation of financial literate people that are going to learn about cryptocurrency. They're way more interested in bringing those users on, those customers on, than they are people who are not as savvy.
Yeah, makes sense. That's really exciting. And then do you find that you and the team are spending a lot of time educating merchants about Bitcoin, or you don't really need to do that because they don't really care? They just see it as another way to incentivize their users or their clients to shop.
Yeah, so I kind of leave it up to the merchant. Some merchants are super curious and are more interested in the crypto aspect of it and getting involved in that space. They're kind of using it as a testing tool to see what the demand is, and we're driving millions and millions and millions of dollars of revenue for these merchants, and thus we have leverage with the merchants to drive real change with them and to have real influence there. So because of that, I think that some merchants, like, when they joined us, they didn't care about crypto. And now because they've seen how much revenue we've driven them, now it's like, money talks, and they are interested in, expanding the program, and they're interested in learning more. So, I always send our merchants the Bitcoin Standard when they're interested, because I think it's a great way for people to learn about what money is, how it works, and everything. And it's funny how like involved a lot of people are in money or commerce, but don't actually know how money works and what it's backed by or not backed by in more cases. So I'm always encouraging our clients, our merchants, to learn about money, so that in 5 years, when I go bring them, this stable coin, or I bring them Bitcoin, with Lightning Network, and I say, this is a more efficient way of transferring money. This is a great tool for you to accept cryptocurrency and remove chargebacks, remove fraud. This is better money. Like, they're more apt to do that, to accept that, because they have an incentive to do so.
Absolutely. And by the way, for listeners who may not be familiar with it, the Bitcoin Standard is a book about Bitcoin. How much does Bitcoin going up and down, like price swings that we see that sometimes can be quite significant in a very short period of time, how much, if at all, does that impact the adoption of Lolli? For instance, I'm wondering if, when Bitcoin price goes up significantly, do you see a spike in terms of adoption and people opting to get their cashbacks in Bitcoin?
Yeah, there's this whole meme in the space that's like, like buy the dip, right? Like, and so a lot of our users are.
But it works there exactly the other way around, right? With many people, like, actually, when Bitcoin goes up, they become interested, and which always is just funny to see.
Yeah, so there's two cycles. There's for our users, it's like earn the dip, when it goes down, and then when it's up, I think it drives a lot of users. Like, we get a lot of like press mentions in mainstream press. Like, I was on CNBC the other day because Bitcoin went up 25%, and so we got to go on there, and we got a ton of new users because it's Fox Business, and we got a whole new group of users, and so Fox Business like talked about Bitcoin, talked about Lolli, and we got to communicate Bitcoin to the masses,
Right.
Because of that. So I think when Bitcoin goes up, people talk about it more, and we get more mentions, and then there's sort of another flywheel effect of like people get involved, and then we hope that it goes up more. But I think historically, it clearly has gone up over time, other than the massive spike we saw in 2018, 2017, I believe, when it went up to 19K. I think other than that, like we've seen, like, most people that have gotten into Bitcoin at most moments, Bitcoin has gone up for them. So most people that are earning with Lolli, Bitcoin has gone up from 3,600, to up to 9K, and most people have like been rewarded, even more so for earning Bitcoin over cash.
Right. And how do you think about differentiating your offering? Right. There are other Bitcoin rewards options out there like Fold and so forth. How do you stand out?
I think we're very focused on Bitcoin. We've built a great community. I personally I'll just brag on my team for a second, but our background is in payments infrastructure. We built a really powerful technology with our last company, and it was really incredible technology. I think that we're building it with the same team. I'm not really worried about other people coming into the space. And really, anyone who does, it's good for Bitcoin adoption. I wouldn't want to compete with us. I think we have like a set of expertise around cashback rewards. We have a set of expertise around payments. And I think we just have the clearest roadmap and team to execute on it. We've had like several copycats that have come out, and many of them have failed already because they don't understand how the model works, either from the merchant side, or they don't understand how the model works from a fraud detection standpoint. Like a lot of people don't realize this, but like a lot of rewards companies are highly advanced fraud detectors. Like there's a lot of fraud that comes with any rewards business, and if you can't detect fraud in the early days, your business model is absolutely crushed. So we built that day one. We're like like businesses, especially startups, are broken by fraud. I think that we're executing really well. Part of it is because we've been building in the space for the last 7-8 years.
And what's your vision for what's next for you guys? We talked about extending your offering beyond online shopping. Anything else that you can share that you're excited about?
The mobile app's the most exciting piece, in my opinion, and then going international. So we're expanding international this year with a few test markets, and then we're also launching the mobile app in the next few months, which we're also really excited about, to both increase the touch points, the merchant adoption piece for more merchants that are native, mobile native, and those are the two pieces that we're expanding most rapidly. For the long term, I'm very excited about more tools that are going to improve on new rails that are going to improve payment systems, improve transactions, stores of value, medium of exchange. This whole world is going to look so different in 5 to 10 years. It already looks different from the last 5 years. So there's a lot of exciting things even outside of Lolli that we hope to leverage and use.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you raised funding slightly more than a year ago, right? And one of the things I'm curious about is some of your investors weren't necessarily crypto dedicated funds. They were more traditional VCs. How did you get them on board? Can you share some for entrepreneurs who are listening and maybe thinking about their fundraising process? Can you share some best practices or thoughts about how to approach the fundraising process that you found helpful when you went through that?
Yeah, great question. For any founders out there, I think you have to play the long game. I think most, if not all of our investors, they turned us down for our last company. They weren't interested in investing in Cosmic.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. So
amazing. And now they decided to invest in this one.
Right. So almost always I always challenge myself to play the long game in almost everything I do. And one of those things was fundraising, and I always found it extremely challenging to fundraise even with our last company. And it was difficult to convince a group of investors that we were building something of value and to fit the traditional VC economics, which is 10x returns. So it's difficult to do that, especially as a first time founder with our last company. And so I built a lot of these relationships. I never got mad when VCs would tell us no. I would very much disagree, but I never burned any bridges, and built a lot of these relationships over the last like 7-8 years, so that when I was starting a new company, they trusted me that I returned money for our last company. I built something of value. I proved a lot of people wrong, and so with some of these investors, they were more investing in the team and less in the Bitcoin aspect of it. Some of them, I think I think a lot of our investors had never invested in a Bitcoin company before, but brought unique expertise or networks that I think that they were really interested in being knowing that they could add value. Forerunner Ventures is a great example. Forerunner has invested in like 100 of the top consumer companies, many retailers, and they have a whole network of incredible retailers, like millennial-focused merchants that we want to partner with. So I think they saw it, and I don't want to like put words in their mouth, but like I think they saw it as a unique way to invest in arguably the most consumer-friendly Bitcoin company, which fits their thesis, being a consumer investor, but also like add value immediately to us by introducing us to their portfolio companies and giving their portfolio companies a unique angle to reach more people, reach this millennial consumer. And so they saw sort of the synergistic effects that would have. We've also had a lot of like angels that had not invested in Bitcoin companies before, but saw Lolli as a way to bring Bitcoin to the masses. So yeah, I think part of, if you look at our syndicate, it was very strategic in bringing on people like DCG who have deep crypto expertise, people who have deep and long-term thinking with Bitcoin as a store of value. And Bain Capital, for instance, who has a long standing place in the fintech world. They know everyone in the payments world, in the fintech world, in the traditional finance world. They've been super helpful on that front, all the way to Forerunner, who is traditionally a consumer investor, who's been helpful on that front. So yeah, I wanted to create the best syndicate that was the most helpful, but also believed in us in the long term, and could support us in future rounds as well.
I really like the point that you made about thinking about the long term and playing the long game. I think more entrepreneurs should take that approach when engaging with investors. And even if it doesn't work out for the existing round of funding, oftentimes you cross paths again, whether it's in subsequent round of funding or in a different company later down the road. I want to ask you a couple of questions about the crypto market more broadly. But before we do that, I can't help but ask you about PayPal and their acquisition of Honey a couple of months ago. For people who maybe not familiar with it, PayPal acquired this shopping and rewards platform called Honey for reported $4 billion in November last year. What are your thoughts on that? I assume it's very positive for you guys. It shows the potential of such functionality and the ability to capture value. Curious how you're thinking about that.
Yeah. So I've known the Honey team for the last 5 years now. And I've just been a huge fan of what they have built. They built an application that really made coupons super easy to get. I think that I took a lot of learnings from them. We actually tried to partner with them with our last company and power native commerce there. We ended up getting acquired before we could partner, but I've stayed in touch with those guys, that team, and yeah, I think that they built something of extreme value, and I think it's going to be a great long-term bet for PayPal, whose value is really at the point of purchase. They want to be the brand at the point of purchase, and Honey is effectively the brand at the point of purchase that a lot of millennial consumers think about for getting that coupon. We want to be that brand that people earn Bitcoin at the point of purchase and ultimately pay with cryptocurrency at the point of purchase. So we've learned a lot from them, and we are applying a lot of those learnings to the product, both in the early days, in the early execution, in the marketing, and ultimately, our I think what we're going to extend to with the mobile app will have hints of what they had with their web application.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were shocked when that announcement came out about the acquisition, just the sheer size of the amount of the transaction, or I guess the acquisition, was a shock to many people in the space. But again, it comes to show the value that you can create if you really execute well on the consumer front.
Right, and I don't feel like, I mean, I'm not. I've been in this space for 7 8 years now, and I was not surprised with the price. I think I might have said it was like a $2 to $3 billion exit, but like I don't know their exact numbers, and I don't claim to. But I mean, I knew that they were a multi-billion-dollar company, where I think a lot of people thought they were like a couple $100 million company, which was the big jump. But they created an incredible business. Like it's a savvy business, and they've built a great brand. Like it is extremely valuable to a lot of different companies, not just PayPal. Like PayPal did not just go out and say, "Hey, I want that for $4 billion." There was definitely a bidding process in that. And I know that Ryan 5 years ago wanted to build a payments company. Like he's been like he's been thinking about Honey in that way for a long time. Like they ultimately chose to get acquired by a payments company instead of build it. But like it just made more sense to do that. Like I think it would be tough to be in the position that he was in, and see all the the road ahead of what they'd have to do to build a payments company, and then have a company like PayPal who already has all the pipeline, or sorry, the pipes already built in, and like I think it's going to be an incredible merger if they can actually execute on the product portion of the merger.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's tough to say no to $4 billion check. So, what are we missing when we think about consumer adoption of crypto? How do you think about that, Alex? Like, what are we missing in order to get to a point where people go to Starbucks and buy their cup of coffee using either Bitcoin or another cryptocurrency? What do we need that doesn't exist right now in order to get there?
I think we need a better medium of exchange. I still haven't seen anything that I have been convinced that is a better medium of exchange, and a more decentralized medium of exchange that has less middlemen, less parties involved in the process of actually transacting and micropayments and changing value, or exchanging value from one person or one business to another person or business. So there's a lot of things that have to like play out, and we're seeing hints of it, but I don't think I've like seen that one thing or that one currency that exists yet. I haven't seen any better store of value than Bitcoin, or anything that is more decentralized than Bitcoin. Emerge. Yeah, I mean, we're keeping our ears and eyes open for it, but I haven't seen it yet.
Got it. So you don't think one of the existing stable coins might serve that purpose?
They might. I think that they have a ways to go to further decentralize, and a lot of these stable coins are probably like many years away from wanting to fully decentralize, because the activity that they need and the staking that they need to fully decentralize we're probably a ways off. Like some of the most decentralized stable coins right now are decentralized by means of VCs or investors, being like making up 100, or probably more cases like 10 different backers. We need thousands and thousands and thousands of sizable stakers that are making it more decentralized than it currently is, so that it's not reliant on a few parties pulling out or making it virtually worthless. I think that Libra is a very interesting project. I'm paying attention to it. I don't know if, just historically, Facebook hasn't really been a very trustworthy institution, and so I am very skeptical. But in theory, if they were good actors, and they truly wanted something that was going to solve real problems, they would further decentralize their technology. They would open source it. They would just give it out to everybody so that more people transact. I don't think if I were to make a bet right now, I don't know if like seeing how they want to own everything and seeing how they've cannibalized certain products that they've had, and seeing some of their stances on privacy. I just don't know if they really want to build what actually is the real need, and they might just be building a shittier version of the current Rails that we have. So yeah, I think that they have the biggest potential because of the reach that they have, but they also haven't shown in many ways that they're able or willing to build something that is like truly open source and truly decentralized, because they are a public company that wants to own everything. So I think like Square is probably the most interesting public company that's doing the most for Bitcoin and probably will do the most for a stable coin if they ever were to launch one.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how Libra plays out. I think the challenge they have there is, like you said, right, from a regulatory perspective. I think that's a challenge. So it's interesting to see how that's going to evolve. I mean, the distribution that Facebook has, nobody really does have. So I think if they are successful in launching it, it could have a huge impact, not just on Facebook and their partners, but also on the industry as a whole. So we'll see how that evolves. Any specific, beyond obviously Lolli, any specific either companies or trends in the crypto space that you're excited about, that you're monitoring closely?
I'm really excited about Lightning Network. I think it's like a really strong team. It's a really interesting project to make Bitcoin more efficient as opposed to launching a new currency. Any sort of currencies that are being launched that are trying to be a more a store of value and they don't have an execution plan on distribution, I think are flawed. So I'm all for, sure, like people should go out and try. We should always try to improve, but Bitcoin has and probably will be for the foreseeable future the best store of value, as far in safe, decentralized store of value for the masses. The Lightning making Bitcoin more efficient is really exciting. I think Bitcoin Pay server of making Bitcoin payments on Lightning Network easy to set up. I think like the world needs a Stripe or a Shopify to exist to make the world easier, or to make Bitcoin easier to transfer. And people need, like I was saying, the current, everybody who's reliant on currencies 46 through 200 is your target market. If you want to bank the unbanked, if you want to be the Stripe for the unbanked, if you want to build that future ecosystem, like there's your opportunity. That's the market that you should be going after. And that market's going to continue to grow the more stable Bitcoin becomes over time. So yeah, Bitcoin Pay server is fascinating to me. They're doing a great job, and completely open source. Lightning Network is really exciting. They're doing a great job. Square Crypto doing a great job. Those are some of the most exciting projects that come to mind. I think Casa is super interesting with just custody solutions and multi-sig from security, privacy. I like what they're doing, and they seem to be well-intentioned, just people, and they're very concerned around privacy and security. So they're a node in every home is ambitious, but I like it. I think it's like net good, and yeah.
Yeah, the Casa team, what they're working on is really interesting. I had Jameson previously on the show, and what I like about them is also the transparency.
Yeah.
So he was talking about, how they make all these very difficult decisions about custody, and then they write these, like very long papers explaining exactly their decision-making process and why they chose to go a certain path rather than different one, and which is something that I just think is very valuable in general. Last question before we go, Alex. We spent so much time talking about Bitcoin. Curious, what's your view on Ethereum?
I think that Ethereum has a lot of work to do. I still like. I look like I mean I want Ethereum to to do great things. I think it has incredible amount of potential. Um, I I think that it like Bitcoin is in its infancy and it really hasn't figured out its killer use case yet. I think ETH 2.0 is something to pay attention to. It's like I wonder how many companies are just going to die on ETH 1 if ETH 2 is the future, and how much more efficient it could be. I don't follow it as closely as I follow Bitcoin, but I think just like every few months I'll like see what's going on in the space because I think it's important for us to keep tabs on it. We like ETH as money, like ETH just as like not talking about DAI or any of the stable coins that have emerged from like this DeFi ETH movement, but just talking about ETH as money, it doesn't quite make sense for us. So it's like we're trying to create
Why not?
because there's no real reason people would want a stable coin right now because you could just go and earn cash back. Like maybe there's a very small percentage of population that would want to earn a currency peg or a stable coin pegged to another currency. But then it's like, how do you? I'm not trying to train a bunch of people to be forex traders. Like that's like a super complicated and probably like fool's errand to go do. So do I want to go give away DAI? Probably not. Like it doesn't. Like I don't really think anyone cares about that.
So I guess I was wondering about ETH specifically. So I get the point about stablecoins. Are you saying you don't see ETH as money?
Correct. In its current state. So do I want to go give all these users that have never had cryptocurrency before, do I want to go give them something that is going to go then change to ETH 2? Then I have to go to all of our users and explain this very complicated transition of like ETH 1 to ETH 2, what it means, why ETH 1 doesn't have as much value anymore, why ETH 2 it has value. Oh, do you want to opt to transfer your to ETH 2? Like the complications with that is just like I'm gonna just like again going back to long-term thinking. I'll go like the ETH community has a lot to figure out. It is in its infancy. I'm not going to go bring ETH to the masses only to have to explain to them how broken it is in its current state. And so I'm going to go let ETH figure itself out. It's not my problem to solve. And I'm really excited for them. I really want them to figure out everything. I want them to, create a better DeFi tools, but they need to make some big decisions over the next couple of years. And those decisions would be extremely cumbersome for me to adopt the problems that they will face by making these decisions, whatever routes that they take, that will be taxing on me as an organization. I have not had that many users that have asked for ETH. Like if I had millions of users that were like begging for ETH, I would probably like think about offering it because there's demand for it. And even though I believe in more Bitcoin as a longer term store of value, I also believe in a free market, and I would also be swayed if I had millions of users that were like demanding ETH. Show me those users. Like no one's asking for ETH right now, and the people that know ETH are just going and buying it on exchanging and using it for developer work. But yay, I could go maybe acquire an extra 1,000 users that are developers that want to earn some ETH for their purchases. It's just it's not our market. It's not a business.
Beyond the point about ETH and Bitcoin, one thing to also take away from your approach, I think for other founders listening to this, is the focus, right?
Yeah.
What I hear talking with you is just focus, right? And
absolutely.
I think oftentimes it's easy look to expand your offering and let's open up more cryptocurrencies. But I think what I hear talking with you is that focus and doubling down on what you're doing rather than trying to do like a bunch of other stuff which might not be valuable to your users. And I think that's an important takeaway, again, regardless of Bitcoin or ETH, just in general.
Exactly. And you have, as a startup, and we're super early stage still, like we have set resources. we can go spend a lot of money and time on building into, ETH, but it's like the actual focus around Bitcoin is so much more productive and has real long-term value. And yeah, I mean, one of my biggest learnings from my last company, like we built a company that had value. We built a really cool technology, but we all have a chip on our shoulder. We wanted to go way bigger. And one of my biggest learnings was focus. Like we tried to do so many different things. And what it came down to at the end of the day is like people wanted one of our products, and that was the killer product. They wanted our API. And that was, in hindsight, I probably should have I mean, granted, you don't know these things until hindsight's 2020, but I only should have focused on the API. And if I put all of our resources into just the API, we could have been bigger. We could have been more pervasive. Like we wasted resources from focusing on things that probably we didn't need to focus on. So I think like a lot, like one of the biggest learnings with the last company going into this company is the need for focus and focusing on the right things and being way smarter about those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's also what experience gives you, right? Yeah, so I mean, I have a different view on ETH, certainly more
I'd love to
positive.
hear it.
But
Yeah, what do you think is going on in the space right now?
yeah, I mean, I'm much more optimistic about ETH. I think, yes, you're right that there's a lot to figure out in terms of ETH 2.0. But I mean, listen, like you look at DeFi, I mean, it didn't exist 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was literally at zero. And now you have what, like give or take, like $700 million locked in ETH across DeFi. And I think it's only the beginning. And I think there's just such a clear opportunity to make more efficient financial products and even beyond financial products. But when you think about financial products, it's so straightforward. It's the opportunity is there. I mean, legacy financial services, like we talked earlier, are so inefficient in so many different ways. So, when you see some of these applications being built right now, which literally takes seconds to implement, and it costs like a fraction of what it would cost if you were to use some of the legacy financial services, then I think there is definitely an opportunity there. I guess my thinking is it just fulfills a different need, right? I completely buy into the whole store of value narrative around Bitcoin. Think it's going to be huge. But I do think ETH is different in that it's more expressive, it's more flexible. You have that smart contracts functionality. And I do think there's a need for it. And we already see that. We see more and more, like 80% of the projects, maybe more, in the crypto space are being built on top of Ethereum. And so I just think it complements Bitcoin rather than compete with it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so I tend to be very positive, both thinking about Bitcoin and Ethereum.
No, and I like how you articulated it, and I agree with everything you said. I think, like I said earlier, I think we're in very early days. I think that there are so many efficiencies that we can find from DeFi and things that it's already doing. I haven't seen or experienced those and how it adds value to ETH as like a just ETH, and so I'm sort of like for one I'm in no rush. Like I think that the best products in the world. I mean, look at Twitter for instance. Twitter isn't like they clearly could have over engineered the shit out of that. They have tens or hundreds of millions of users. Like they could have built a billion features by now. They could have built an edit button. They could have built a whole arbitration network. They could have built like a million things. But at the end of the day, like everyone uses it for one thing, and it's arguably the same thing that they downloaded it for, 10 years ago or over the last 10 years. Like figuring out that one thing and doing it better than anybody, and then figuring out growth from that one thing is arguably way more important. And then over time, like there will be other things that will like add value. So I'm in no rush to add ETH, and I'm all ears. Like I encourage everyone from the ETH community to convince me. And I'm like, yeah, I would love after the call for you to send me, any literature on, ETH to show me, early signs of DeFi products adding value to the network as a whole, and us using more ETH to fulfill these smart contracts, to do these DeFi projects at scale. That's what I'm waiting on. I'm just in no rush to do it.
Yeah, well, hopefully this is the first step in convincing you about it. So, Alex, thanks so much for taking the time to come on the show. Really appreciate you sharing your insights, and very much looking forward to see what's next for Lolli. Sounds like exciting times for you guys.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're working hard over here.
Thanks for listening. If you like this episode of the Blockchain VC and want to help bring more awareness to the space, I'd really appreciate it if you can rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. This only takes a few seconds and helps get the word out.